So just real quick, so I'm David Hawks. What I do for a living is help organizations that are going through agile transformations. Easy stuff, right? Everybody's really doing great at agile, and actually that's not the case. I've been doing a survey for the last 2 years of most of the talks that I've been doing, polling folks on what is really the state of agility out there, and it's not that good. What we're seeing is 30% of organizations are stuck in this kind of like superficial agility mode. And some of y'all might, I see some nodding like, yeah, maybe that's your organization. I call this, we put agile lipstick on a waterfall pig, right? It's like we're going through the motions of agile, but we're still doing big project funding, we're assigning people to projects, we're disbanding teams after projects are over, right? We're not really achieving the promise of agility. And then we've got 50% here that are improving agility, but not getting to the other side, getting to the real benefits. And the benefit side I have up here is predictable or fast. And predictable isn't for me like we know exactly what we're going to deliver 6 months from now. It's more like we have a predictable cadence of delivery. We know our cycle time. We can get 5 things done every 2 weeks, whatever that might be. And then we can optimize for speed. And so the question is, why are we struggling? Why are we struggling as an industry? And it's easy to blame things like, well, leadership's not on board. It's their fault over there, which, there's maybe a little bit of truth to that. But what I'm going to walk through today are kind of 7 areas, 7 patterns of places where I see people stumble. And see if that might help you guys in kind of your quest, because you're probably somewhere across this map as well. So the first problem is what I call a mini waterfall. So we were doing waterfall, and we were doing like, a month of requirements and a month of design and 2 months of dev and a month of QA or testing at the end. And what happens to that final month of testing? Do you think it only takes a month? Or do you think like the project's green, 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 and then when we get to testing, what color does everything go? It all goes red, right? I call waterfall has what I call watermelon metrics. Green on the outside, red on the inside, right? So it looks okay. There's an illusion of everything's on track, but really we know deep down inside things are going to go off the rails as soon as we start integrating everything, testing everything. And so when we start doing things like Scrum or even Kanban, the goal isn't to just still work in a waterfall way. And so what we see a lot of times is this. Let's say we had a scenario, we're doing Scrum, and we had a 2-week sprint, we had 4 user stories, 4 developers, 2 QA folks on a team. What do you think the developers would do in terms of saying, what's the most efficient way for us to sign out this work? What would we default to? Probably each developer take 1 story, right? Everybody go work on your own things, right? And so what happens is all of a sudden, developer 1 takes story 1, developer 2 takes story 2, developer 3, developer 4, and everything looks good, green, 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 and then at the end we hand it over to QA. QA 1 takes that one, QA 2 takes that one. How do you think this is going to go? What do you think is going to happen in the last 2 days of the sprint? Everything's going to be like, oh, we just found a bunch of bugs, we're not going to get everything done, we ran out of time. So where's all the work go? It carries over into the next sprint, which means we're not working in a predictable way. The goal of Scrum is to have a potentially shippable product increment every 2 weeks. And if we work in this way, we're adding a lot of risk to the end. I call it a risk iceberg. It's like for 8 days of the sprint, all we could see is the tip of the iceberg, and we couldn't see below the waterline, and then we start testing things. Right? And so this is why we start doing things like continuous integration, unit testing, test-driven development, other things to try and move the testing cycle earlier. But the real thing that we need to do, not just doing the test automation in that way, but we also need to think about how do we break our work down and how do we swarm as a team. And it's not about efficiency of developer as much as it's about the effectiveness of getting value out the door every 2 weeks. So if we start looking at how can we swarm, that requires new skills, like we need to be able to break work down. We need to be able to work in a more collaborative way, right? We need to not only break down like the stories, the features into smaller things that we can test along the way, Well, we got to figure out how can we break the tasks down in a way where you're working on the database stuff, I'm working on the UI stuff, and we're trying to integrate that early and often and throughout so that every couple of days we have something done, right? We're trying to get done every few days, not get done at the end of the sprint. When we leave it all to the end of the sprint, we're just asking ourselves for a lot of trouble. But these become new skills that we've got to learn as a team. The second problem is that we're not really acting as a team, right? We saw that a little bit in this last example, but the second problem, what happens is when we start forming teams, we start off, we've got individuals, right? And then the question becomes, well, let's put everybody together. We call that a team just because we put everybody in one group. And a lot of times we call a team, it's just all the people that report to one manager. They're a team. But are we really a team if all we're doing is working on our own thing? So in that first scenario, that mini waterfall, is that group really acting like a team if everybody's just working on their own thing? What I think that is actually a group of people cooperating with each other. What that looks like is I'll help you once I get my stuff done, right? But it's really about me and my goal. It's not really about a shared goal. And when we talk about high-performing teams, if you think about like a high-performing basketball team or football team, it's not about, everybody gets mad at that wide receiver who's showboating, because they just made a big play, but we're losing by 14 points. It doesn't matter. Right, so it's all about are we winning as a team, not are you getting your stuff done, but we didn't, it's like you as a developer got all your work done, but QA is over here swamped and we're not actually getting anything out the door. It doesn't matter. Right? We're not delivering any value if you're just getting a bunch of stuff done, but we're not actually getting it delivered. So when we start looking at team dynamics, it's really about a team is a collaboration of folks targeting the same goal. Right, we're all working towards the same mission. We call this shared ownership. Right? We all have shared ownership of this common goal. And then we want to, in Agile, we talk a lot about self-organizing teams. What that means is the teams are taking ownership of the how. We're collaborating on how to get it done together. And at the end of, if we're doing Scrum, we're doing sprint planning, at the end of it, it's supposed to be all right, we all are aligned, we all are aligned on this mission. Right, together, not, all right, you do your work, I'll do my work, right? It's about we trying to get this done. That's where the daily Scrum is supposed to be. Some people are like, you know what, we don't really need to meet every day, do we? Right? And the reason why a lot of times daily Scrums aren't effective for a team is because you're really a group cooperating. And you're like, there's not a lot of value in us huddling every day because I'm off working on my thing for 8 days and you're working on your thing for 8 days. So why do we need a daily Scrum? Well, the reason why that's dysfunctional is because we're not actually working as a team towards the same goal, swarming on something together. And if we were, then we probably would need to huddle every day and make sure we're still aligned. So at the end of the day, it's about that. And then really high-performing teams start to get to the level of what we call self-managing team that's really holding themselves accountable, and self-directing teams that are really kind of focused on, all right, high alignment of the team to the problem that they're solving and working together to figure out what's the best thing for us to work on next. Not just in a kind of basic Scrum team that's saying, hey, product owner, what do we do? Right? It's the whole team is engaged in trying to figure out what are the right things to do, running the right experiments, and testing things from a production perspective. Now, the third problem is that I think most organizations have sub-optimized for their organizational structure for delivering value. Most organizations, especially as we've scaled, I work with a lot of big enterprise organizations, and definitely in big enterprises, we have sub-optimized the structure of our organization for actually getting value out the door. And what I mean by that is many organizations start optimizing by component layer, right? So they start optimizing and saying, okay, we're gonna have the UI team, we're gonna have the middle tier team, we're gonna have the database team. But let's think about what happens as we start to deliver value, right? What starts to happen when we say, okay, customer makes a request. We create a requirement for that, a user requirement. Which team out of these three do you think reads that requirements document? Who interacts with the user? The UI team. So the UI team reads the document, and they say, they start working on it and they go, you know what, we need something from the middle tier team. So what do you think they do? They open a ticket. How many people in here use Jira? Right? All right, so we use Jira. So we open a ticket in Jira to the middle tier team. Do you think the middle tier team starts to work on it immediately? Or do you think they have a queue of work, right? So it waits on the middle tier's queue of work, and eventually the middle tier team picks it up. They make a request, they're like, oh, we need something from the database team. You think they open a ticket to database? Does database work on it immediately? You don't know. It sits in a queue, it waits on database team. Now at this point, how well does the database team understand the business requirement? Right? They don't know it, they don't understand it at all. But they're building us the best damn database architecture, right? So what business problems? We have no idea, right? But here we have the database team, and then they deliver something back up to the middle tier. So do you think it works the first time? No. It's going to end up going back to the database team, and then they deliver something in the middle tier. Then it goes back up to the UI. Do you think it works the first time? No. So it's going to go back through this sequence, and it could just be looping. And how long do you think this could take? It could take weeks, it could take months. Now, eventually we deliver something up to the customer. Is the customer happy with this process? No, because it takes forever. And when do you think we declared that we are done? When we ran out of time. It's not because we got the best product, it's because we ran out of time, because this takes too long to keep going through this. And eventually we're like, you know what, it's good enough, let's just ship it, right? That's not a great way for us to deliver value to our customers. So what we have optimized for, when we create these horizontal teams, what we have optimized for is what I call output. We're cranking out as much database code as possible. We're cranking out as much middle tier code as possible. We're cranking out as much UI code, and we're doing that in an efficient way. Efficient for who? Right? It's efficient for UI, it's efficient for middle tier. We call that local optimization versus global optimization. We've optimized locally. We've optimized it. We can move UI people around, we can move them to the highest priority thing, and we're doing all this task switching as opposed to optimizing for delivering value, which is the vertical here, and optimizing for outcome. Our goal is not to deliver as much output as possible. Our goal is to deliver as much outcome with the least amount of output. But most of our organizations are optimized for just cranking stuff out. You're going to see a stat here in a second that we crank out a lot of wrong stuff, right? And I think a lot of it is because of this type of structure. Now there's another scenario that could work in this output way, which is, let's say we all read the document. So we had a business requirements document, and let's say each of these teams read that document to determine what they needed to build, right? As opposed to the whole queuing thing that happened. Let's say the document says, we need to build a shape, right? So UI teams like, we know what a shape is, like triangle. Middle tiers like, we know what a shape is, square. Database people think in cylinders, right? So database people, they know what shape is. And then all of a sudden we go along and we start building. Everything looks good. Green. We got to integrate everything. What color is it going to hit? You guys heard this story already once? Right, we're going to go red, right? Because everybody thought they understood, but until we start putting it all together, we don't really know if we've got a solution that's going to work, right? And so then we start having to rework and do things, which isn't any fun as a developer, right? I used to be a developer. Nobody lets me write code anymore, but the good news is my son's development skills have now surpassed my declining skills, and that means he can get off my payroll. So that's all good. So what we want to do is make sure we start aligning to feature teams. Now, some people are concerned with that if we kind of align teams in the orange kind of vertical way here, because they're like, well, won't we end up with 3 different database architectures? Right? So the database people still need to talk. I'm not saying the database people can't talk anymore, but the database people still need to talk. The argument is, from an agile and a delivery of value perspective, these people, the database people, need to talk occasionally. Maybe once or twice a week. Talk about standards. Hey, what are you doing over in your work? I'm doing this in my work. But these people vertically need to talk all day, every day. All day, every day, we need to coordinate. That's what we have a daily Scrum for. for us to talk about, okay, what are you working on? Hey, I'm working on this. Is that blocking you? How's this going to work? And let's work through those issues together. Right? So the feature teams is what we're all about. Cross-functional feature teams with the definition of what I used for teams a second ago. Now, problem number 4. I call this trying to go too fast. And this is a story of an experience I had when I was managing a development team. And so what happened was we had a plan. And I thought, this was a point when I thought, all right, we had figured this Agile stuff out. And really your Agile journey kind of goes like 0 to 20 miles an hour, 20 to 40, 40 to 60. You can't get from 0 to 100 overnight. And along the way, there's points when you think like, I figured it out, and then you have a big aha. So here's a story where I had a big aha. So we had 4 sprints planned to deliver 80 points, and we had this hardening sprint here at the end. And the hardening sprint was, just that last kind of wrap everything up, tighten everything up, get the release notes, get all that stuff kind of done. And so what we had planned was that each sprint was 2 weeks long, and we're going to do 20 points of work. If you're not familiar with story points, just think of a unit of size. So 20 points worth of work each sprint. We didn't have any points planned for the hardening sprint, right? We just said that was how we were going to get 80 points done over this 10-week period. So how do y'all think this went? We had this definition done that we wanted things feature complete and feature tested in the sprint, and we fixed as many bugs as we could, but all of a sudden, but we also noticed like we have the hardening sprint, so any hangover bugs, we'll just get those fixed in the hardening sprint. You guys starting to get an idea of how this story might end? Right, so how long do you think that hardening sprint took? It took 8 weeks to do the hardening sprint. So we ended up doing 8 weeks of sprints, and then we had all those bugs that we deferred to the last sprint, and all of a sudden that took another 8 weeks. So it ended up that we delivered 80 points in 16 weeks, which was really only 10 points per 2-week period, right? If you average that out. So we thought we had a 20-point velocity, but if you really looked at it, we almost had just a 10-point velocity. And so let's think about the nature of a bug. A bug or a defect is just a reporting of a symptom. Have anybody in here ever gotten an argument about should we estimate or not estimate bugs? This is a fun one, right? This is a fun argument. And the reason why we get into that argument is because it's really hard to estimate a bug. A bug is reporting a symptom. We don't know what the root cause is. You're asking me to size it, and I don't even know what the problem is yet. So most of the work for finding a defect is just investigating, trying to figure out the root cause. As soon as you figure out the root cause, sometimes it's as easy as like, oh, that should be a double equals, right? Like you go down and it could be a pretty simple fix, right? It could take 1 minute to fix it, but finding it is what takes all the time. So when we defer bugs too late in the process, we're leaving a lot of risk, a lot of unknown risk. And what happens is when you fix a bug, what's likely going to be behind that bug? Another bug, right? Because the definition of a bug is that it blocked a test case from being executed. So you're able to, I did step 1, step 2, step 3, I found a bug, which means I couldn't do step 4, 5, 6, and 7. So when we fix that bug, then all of a sudden we find some hidden work. So that's why when we think about bugs, we should treat them like there's nothing higher priority than fixing a bug. There's no reason we should work on anything else besides just fixing the defect that's blocking the quality, blocking our test cases from being able to get done. So what we did with this was we said, all right, team, we need to go slower. I only want you to commit to 15 points per sprint. How do you think the team reacted to that? They're like, no, but we can do 20. I was like, no, you can't. Right? You think you can start 20, you can get 20 dev complete, but we can't get 20 done. And I want you to get 15 points done. So what we need to do as a team is we actually need to go slower to go fast. So we changed our definition of done to not just feature complete and feature tested, but that we actually fix the defects in the sprint, which means we need to leave some bandwidth for us to be able to fix things that we don't know what they are yet. So don't ever go into sprint planning and plan 100% of your capacity, because there's going to be unknown things that you're going to discover along the way. Some of those are going to be bugs. So what we did was we ended up doing this where we said, all right, we're going to do a 10-week release again, but we're going to do 15 points per sprint. So if you think about that, and we got it all done on time. No slippage, no date change. We ended up delivering 75 points in 10 weeks, which and doing 15 points. But that's almost doubling our productivity, right? We did 80 points in 16 weeks, and then we ended up doing 75 in 10 weeks. We almost doubled our productivity by going slower, right? And that's something that's really hard as developers for us to think about, okay, we're going to work on less stuff. We're going to commit to less stuff, but we're going to commit to getting it all the way done. That's what we really need to do, and that's how we get predictable. I know there's a whole movement out there about hashtag no estimates, and we love that as developers, right? Like, nobody wants to estimate anything, but part of it's because we're not working in a predictable way. And here's the thing, as developers, if we don't do the work to try and forecast, to be able to kind of plan out a date, what's the business going to give us? Right? If we say we can't tell them a date, then they're going to give us a date. I call that hippie agile. Like hippie agile is where you as a developer like, hey man, like you'll get it when you get it, man. Like we're agile, right? That's not really how it's supposed to go, right? We can forecast, but in order to forecast with some level of certainty, we've got to be able to work in a predictable way. And the key to doing that is to actually fixing and getting to done every 2 weeks. So the fifth problem here is building the wrong things. There's a scary stat in the world that says that 64% of the features we build are rarely or never used. 64%. Now let's think about this word requirement. Right? Think about what that word means to you. A requirement. Sounds like a fixed factual thing, right? It's a requirement. How many times do you get something that's a requirement and it's got a fixed date on it? And is it really a fixed date? Or is that just a date somebody set somewhere, right? It's a requirement. I think every requirement we have is a guess. Right? Every requirement for your system to build is a guess. And really what it is a bet. It's a bet with the company's money. That we're going to make this bet, and we think if we build this thing, it will have some return on investment. And we keep thinking about every requirement as something that's fixed and factual, but it's not. And so I think we should change our process. Instead of building all these features that are the wrong features, right? If we could figure out what are the right features, we could double our productivity right here. Right? If we started working on the right stuff, then we would work on less of the dumb stuff, and we'd actually get things out the door. So the way that I think about this is changing from our traditional kind of like, all right, let's define all our features, let's define all our user stories, let's put them all in a backlog, let's get all the executives to subjectively prioritize all these, right? And all they're basing it on is gut, right? I think the VP of sales is saying, hey, if we get this feature, we'll get $5 million in new sales. All right, you're going to bet your house on that? Right? Like, no, he's guessing. It's a bet. And so I think we should think about every requirement we have as what's the hypothesis? The hypothesis is if we build this, we will get a benefit. And then we need to think about what's the smallest experiment we could build to be able to test that, to prove that true or to prove that false. It all starts with us being clear about what's the objective from a business perspective. What is it that we're trying to do? So I teach some Agile classes, and we always have a user story we use. That's an example that says, as a frequent flyer, I want to rebook a past trip so I can save time booking trips I take. Right? That's a valid user story. It has as a, wants so that. Great. But what I think user stories, I did a talk last year that was called User Stories Suck. And the reason for that is because user stories are now 20 years old, and they were invented over 20 years ago, and they're missing a key component. The key component is, why would we as a business build that feature? And as developers, we need that context. We need to understand the why. And so user stories are really good about understanding the why from a user's perspective, but they're missing why would we build it from a business perspective? What's the goal we're trying to hit? And so if we think about like that frequent flyer story, we would say something like, well, we want to get more business from the frequent flyer market. Our hypothesis is that if we save them time, they'll book more business with us. What is the smallest experiment we could go do to try and prove that hypothesis true or false? And because of today's technology, because of our ability to release continuously, our ability to orchestrate what's in production, our ability to run tests, A/B testing, and do things like that, right? Because of SaaS cloud, all the stuff, we now can run small experiments and test things in a way that we never were able to do before. And so we've got to leverage that power to make small bets that validate or invalidate our ideas as fast as possible, and then make the bigger bets based on that objective data, not the subjective data. There's a story that goes that somebody at Amazon was trying to propose an idea, and Jeff Bezos was like, he's like, we need to do this, and he goes, well, put a link on the homepage. And they're like, well, we haven't built anything yet. Where would that link go? He said, 404 error page. Right? And he's like, all right, you're the boss. And they put a link on the homepage, nobody ever clicked on it. Do they need to build this feature? No, that's objective data, right? Versus somebody's hunch and all the analysis that had gone into this idea that was something that we should build. Now the sixth problem is that most organizations' agile transformations, agile changes, agile adoptions, agile transitions, whatever term you want to use, have been only focused on the team. And the team is just one part of it. And so most agile transformations over the last 10, 15 years have really been team only. And so we can say, well, yeah, leadership hasn't been a part of it. And so what that looks like is that we got things at a team level, like, all right, Scrum, Kanban, even from a DevOps practices perspective, like these are all things that we're doing at a team level. But there's also a system component. And when I talk about system, I'm talking about not the technical system, but the system of teams, the flow of value delivery across all the teams that it takes to get product out the door. Are we optimizing the system and the flow of value delivery? And here's where some of the scaling frameworks are coming into play to help us there. And then the third level that's really missing from a focus is from an organizational perspective, from a leadership perspective, from a HR practices. Like if we're still doing stack ranking of performance and annual reviews, that doesn't seem very agile. If we're still doing funding of projects, so from a finance practices versus product investment streams, right? That's not very agile. So are we changing? So most organizations, we're doing team level agile practices, and we're still in a kind of waterfall container. The decisions that are being made up here in the organizational and system level are still very waterfall. And so we've got to start changing things at all levels. And so we've been doing some work with this Path to Agility framework to start outlining what are the things that we need to do at all levels, not just from a team level practices perspective. So that's problem number 6. Problem number 7 is that there's no method to the madness. So we think that most agile transformations that fail are because they have the wrong goal. They have the wrong objective. If I go to most CIOs and I say, well, what's your goal with Agile, or what's your Agile transformation all about? I get things like, our goal is to be Agile. Well, that's a solution that may or may not be the right solution. Like, what is it that you're really trying to achieve? Or I get what is our goal? Well, our goal is to implement Scaled Agile framework. Our goal is to implement Scrum. Well, those are practices, those are solutions, and they may be the right solutions, but if I came to any of you and said, hey, I got this new idea to change your process, are you motivated to change? I got new processes. You excited about that? Nobody's excited about doing new processes, right? What we're excited, we could get excited about is solving a problem, right? What is it, if I told you the reason why we're doing Agile is because it's imperative for us to release faster, to be able to respond faster to the market, because our competitors are doing it, and if we don't respond quicker, if we can't get faster product out the door, faster value, more value, then we're going to get put out of business. Well, that's compelling. All right, now let's look at what are all the things from an Agile outcomes perspective that we could do at the team level, at the system level, at the organizational level. That's what we really need to focus on, and we need to focus on the outcomes we're trying to achieve, the capabilities we're trying to develop within the organization, not the practices that we're trying to implement. We need to focus on those last, right? Is Scrum the right answer? Maybe. Is Kanban the right answer? Maybe. What are we trying to do? We're trying to deliver more predictably, we're trying to deliver faster. Those are the things that we really want to achieve. So that's my talk. Those are my 7 things. And if you, my name's David Hawks. If you're interested in more information, you can get me at Austin Agile or David at AgileVelocity.com. Thank you.